I joined through a real estate club, and I picked up a lot of the knowledge and the education that I needed. And within that club, I met a lot of people. I networked within the group. I met a fellow investor who he and I decided to start a property management company together. Over the next 3 years, we acquired 10 properties, 2,000 units. I was the operating arm. That was in 2007. So it was right during the recession, not too dissimilar to what's going on right now with COVID. And so I was able to get us the performance we needed. We refinanced 3 times during that time, and we stayed above water. In 2011, he and I had a parting of ways. I started Rockstar Capital. Over the next 10 years, this is our 10-year anniversary. In fact, it's going to be in 2 months. So I'm super excited about that. We've acquired 22 multifamily assets, totaling 4,200 units, with 13 cash out refinance events during that time. Our company as a whole has earned 18 city, state, and national apartment association awards. To my knowledge, I am the country's only 2-time national independent apartment owner of the year.
Yeah, congratulations to all that success, right? So that's a very impressive track record in a comparatively very short period of time, right? So yes, it's 10 years, but doing all this within 10 years with large multifamily communities, that's definitely a major achievement. So congratulations to that. I would say today, really, we have the privilege to hear from you, and obviously my colleague Ben will also share some of his knowledge here. Today, we really have the special privilege to talk about Houston with Robert as one of the top experts in multifamily investing in the Houston market. There are not many property owners in the greater Houston MSA with that many multifamily properties. So thanks again for willing to come on with us and share your knowledge, Robert. So maybe you can tell us how did you start out initially before we get in a little bit more into the current environment? How did you pick some markets? I know you have a number of properties that I think you started out, if I'm not mistaken, in Humble, right? So you had quite a number of very great successes in Humble. Did you pick that market specifically, or was it just because there were the opportunities and you jumped on those?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because I think a lot of people need to plan ahead. They need to know where they want to be. They're going to have to assume success, not failure. They're going to assume that this is going to be something that they're going to do long term. So you definitely want to make sure that you know where you want to invest in. That's not what happened with me initially. My first deal as the GP came in 2010. I bought a deal called Water Chase Apartments that we paid $24,500 a door for. And when I had a lot of success with that with that asset, that I liked the submarket. And I started to buy another deal. I bought a deal across the street, which is called North Lake Manor, 126 units. A year later, I decided that I wanted to go to a different part of town. But then another year later, I came back to Humble. And so today we own 8 properties that are in the Humble zip codes. So roughly 73% of the workforce housing that's in those areas. And I learned a lot, right? Because you can control rents. If there's an uptick, you go with it. There's a little bit of a downtick, you go down too. But you get economies of scale. You get to learn the market really well. Brokers know you're Mr. Humble. So whenever there's a deal around the area, they want to give you a call first. So forward thinking ahead, that's really good when people associate you with markets. I definitely think you want to pick markets where the schools are good. I'm not a big fan of Houston proper itself. I don't like to invest in Southwest Houston. I don't like to invest in the heavy urban areas. I want to be where the suburbs are. And the reason I want to be where the suburbs are, because that's where the schools are. And if there's good schools there, there's going to be families. And if they move into one of your apartments, chances are they have a brother and a sister. So there, you got all the boxes checked there. Good school district, family, brother and sister. They're probably going to stick around and stay in that apartment a lot longer than the normal renter who's a single young couple, an empty nester who might be living closer to town for work or what have you. That's the prime reason why people move to the suburbs. They want to get somewhere where they can afford the cost of housing and where their kids can get a good education. So,
and I would say even these days too, that's actually a pretty smart play, because a lot of the urban areas because of COVID, right? A lot of people are trying to move out into the suburbs, get a little bit more space, and so that's why they're kind of saying suburbs and even these secondary and tertiary markets are starting to become even hotter than they were, just because of COVID, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You got to pay attention to all that. I think you got to think ahead too. It's like, I want to be in an area that I know. Now I didn't ever imagine getting to 22 properties. That wasn't really on my goal. I didn't imagine having 4,200 units. I thought I was just going to buy one deal a year. And that's what I did. One deal a year, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013. It wasn't until 2014 when I bought multiple deals that year. And again, half of the deals that I bought were in Humble, but the new deals that I did buy were in other submarkets. I've got deals in Rosenberg and Richmond, right? And they've done very well for themselves. And because right now, if you're following the demographics, that's one of the hottest spots of Houston is that Richmond, Rosenberg. We're very fortunate to have two deals already there. A smaller, it's 108 units, and a deal that's 272. So we benefit from that, but it's a little forward thinking. Don't just buy to buy. Yeah. Ask yourself, can I buy here, and will I want to buy there again?
And one question,
everywhere we go, we want to buy around 1,000 units if we can. That's the plan. Can I own 1,000 units in that submarket? And if I don't, then I don't want to be there.
And you kind of mentioned economies of scale earlier, right? Obviously that's what people need to, that's the takeaway from that comment, right? Is that if you can have that, right, you can not only control rents, right, but maybe you can share maintenance people, maybe you can share leasing staff, maybe you can do these creative things that if you only have one property and some one-off, market that's almost a forgotten deal, it makes it more challenging to manage that, right? So one question I did have, you had mentioned, just kind of taking a step back, you had mentioned that you don't like Houston proper, right? So, you're not talking about the Houston MSA when you say that. And I know what you're talking about, but I want to just clarify this for people that aren't familiar with Houston. You're talking about Houston ISD, right? Yeah. And where all that encompasses, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because the schools aren't any good.
So, okay, for our listeners that are outside of the Houston area, aren't familiar with Houston, right? He's talking about HISD, which is one of the biggest school districts in the country.
But not one of the best.
Not one of the best, and certainly not one of the best in the Houston MSA. So Robert has a really good point there that he's chasing deals in better school districts in the greater Houston area, right? Because ultimately, like you said, families are going to follow the good school districts, and we have people that they'll lease just in our property just to be in the school district, right? It's not, and they'll sit there and they'll take rent increases and, because ultimately they are there for their children to go to school there. Right. That is the number one reason why they're staying there. Right. And so if you take care of them, you instill that sense of community, you take care of the families, you retain them, you can have a success, long-term tenant and have a lot of success in doing it. So
yeah, right. But remember though, it's not a one size fits all. I did buy a deal in 2012, and I bought it because it had long-term historical occupancy, but it was 108 units, all one beds, and it was in Houston city limits. And it's zoned to HISD. But what was interesting about that deal is that it was predominantly Jewish based.
Okay.
And they have the Sabbath and they have other things going on the weekends. So there was literally a synagogue that was like a quarter mile down the road. It was literally almost across the street. There was a retail center which had everything that you needed, right? Because I think part of the faith is they can't drive vehicles. Yep. Right. There was a neighborhood Walmart. There aren't very many of those in Houston. There was a neighborhood Walmart right across the road. And that deal did really well for us, even though it was all one beds and it had nothing to do with school districts because it was a different demographic. So again, I'm talking about the families and the suburbs, but there is other ways to skin the cat. You just got to see if that way fits for you. What is the advantage of that property? The advantage for us is that it was right next to everywhere anybody living at that property who was not allowed to drive a vehicle, right, would be able to get to. And it worked out really well for us.
That's an excellent point, right? I think what you really bring to the table here is the message, understand the demographics and understand your tenant base, right? Don't just make high-level assumptions based on what you read on CoStar reports or other market reports, but really study your small submarket where you look at that property and how that tenant base operates on a day-by-day basis.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm really happy you mentioned that too, because a lot of guys, when they get started, they don't have the market research. You know, if you're working with a good broker, whether it's the mortgage broker or even the sales broker, they should be sending you reports. But as soon as you can get to the point where you have enough money coming in that you can pay for real data, you can do it. CoStar is expensive, but you get what you pay for sure. I've paid $99 for something for, I think, O'Connor back in the day when they had their own information, and I'm paying thousands of dollars a month for CoStar, but we're in a different scale today, so we can afford it. But man, what a difference in the data. Data is knowledge. Knowledge is power. You got to have the data to make the right calls.
Absolutely. I was going to ask, so, you know, you kind of talked about 100 units, 200 units. What is your current box? Like, you know, what are the deals that Rockstar Capital is looking at in 2021 and beyond, right? You know, obviously, as you scale up, you're probably looking for something a little bit bigger. You know, what does that box look like?
Yeah, and I guess it just depends on where you are in your evolution of your buying cycle. An early guy like me, I wanted 100-unit boxes. You know, my first it was 118, a 126, a 108, a 125, a 162, a 151. These are smaller boxes that I could control, that I could have a say-so. When you get to be much larger, you lose a little bit of that control. Now, what happens is, though, you realize that as you get larger and larger, fees are important. Fees are important to what the management fee is, because the more units you have, the better quality of staff that you can hire.
Absolutely. The
quality of manager at a 100-unit property, let's say you can pay them $45,000 a year. When you have a 300-unit property, you can't pay $45,000 a year and get a quality staff member. You're now looking at $60K a year or $70K a year. But I can tell you, knowing what I know now, when you're paying for more, you're going to get more, right? A couple of leases more a month more than covers that person's salary. So as we've grown and we have scale now, I mean, I've got 22 managers, you know, but our last deal was 458 units. But now I can afford to pay a manager $80,000 to $90,000 because she's overseeing $400,000 worth of collections, per month. And she has a team. And what is her track record? She's basically running a little city, right? So you've got to be able to, the doors matter. I think Grant Cardone likes to say that, right? More units is better. He's 100% right, because more units gives you power. You know what else is important too with units? When you have revenue, you also got a bigger marketing budget. Yeah, if you're not marketing on social media today, then you're going to go out of business real soon. If you don't have a brand, you're going to go out of business real soon. A $500 ad on Facebook costs the same for a 100-unit property or a 400-unit property, but it's a different percentage point of the overall budget, right? So more units is better. You're going to get more exposure. So so today's Rockstar, to answer your question, we go bigger. I mean, it's going to have to be in that 250 plus range to get my attention. And again, it's going to have to be also in an area that I see myself buying more. Today, we're issuing a letter of intent on a deal down south, and I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't already have 2 deals nearby. Yeah. But I'm excited now. I know what the submarket is, and that's everything too. When you own a submarket, you don't have to do one market survey. So in your region or whoever it is going there, they know where the rents are. That's just one less item that they have to worry about.
So, I mean, once again, it goes back to your meta point here on a lot of this is you have economies of scale, right? And that goes back to, even if you don't have 15 different properties altogether, if you have 2 or 3 big ones, it's the same thing, right? You have enough money getting generated to come in and ultimately, get the right staff, get the right budget in place, and be able to scale from there.
So, I recommend anybody out there, you need to cut your teeth on the smaller deals, but as fast as you can get to the larger deals.
Yeah, that's where you learn.
Better to have.
You got to get creative on those smaller deals, right? That's the most important thing to kind of learn is those are the deals that you really might have to roll up your sleeves and go help. I mean, I've been out on properties. You got to, roll up your sleeves. You got to paint maybe sometimes. You got to help trash out units, because that 100 unit, that 90 unit, that's kind of a weird unit count, right? Where, maybe you have, a person and a half outside, maybe you don't. Maybe you have, one person inside, maybe you don't. Maybe you're sharing resources, and you got to get creative there. And sometimes getting creative means you got to step in and do it yourself, right?
Absolutely. And here's the other thing too. If you have 1,000-unit portfolio, do you want to spread on 100 unit on 10 deals at 100 units each, or do you want 5 deals at 200 units each? Right? It's easier to get to them all. And guess what? Because other people recognize that units do matter, you're going to get more attention on the sale. Yeah. Right. You're going to get more and more buyers on your 200, 300 unit deal than you would be on your 50 unit or 100 unit deal. That's a completely different buyer. right? And you're going to get more attention on the deal we bought where we closed. It was 458 units. COVID impacted. It only had 11 offers, but a year earlier that would have had 31 offers. It just, there was a COVID impact.
So
but
let's follow that thread though. Let's follow that thread because you just brought up a very, very good point, right? Obviously, COVID has changed the buying and the selling process, right? At least over the last 10, 12 months, right? And I think it's going to continue at least for the next probably 3 to 6, right? What are you seeing in the market in terms of, offer sent, tours, demand, supply, the whole buying and the selling, part of this process? I mean, are you still seeing a lot of demand coming into the Houston market, or kind of, I guess, educate our listeners a little bit on it, what you're seeing?
Yeah, you asked a lot of questions on that subject. There's a lot of places to go with that. I think demand towards the end of Q3, Q4 started to slow down. I'm seeing it pick. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Demand's always been there. Excuse me. Supply has not been there. Now at the beginning of the new year, you're seeing supply pick up. You're seeing opportunities there. I also think because you're getting closer to when some of these guys took the forbearance a year ago, right, or 9 months ago, and now it might be time to pay the piper. I think you got to be very choosy on what deals you want. I think there are some parts of the city that are doing very COVID resilient. There are other parts that are struggling. I'm very happy that multifamily as a whole has done well. We have 6 data points on our reporting, and we know exactly where collections should be. Right now, at the 20th of the month, we're at around 90% collections. But there was a point in time where the 20th of the month, we were at 96% collections, with COVID. That was just not too many months ago. So it's getting harder and harder to collect the rent. They keep kicking the can down the road with the CDC, pushing it back to March. I'm here in September. The thing is, owners got to get more aggressive. You have to realize, you know what? I know you have money. I know that unemployment is 6.8%. I know that that's exactly where it was during the Obama administration, and we were hitting record collections and record NOI. So I know you have money. I know there's a new aid package coming out that's going to result in around $2,000 a person. So a family of 4, you got $8,000 that you can use to pay your rent, which is what it's for. But instead, what we're doing is we're seeing Samsung and Sony boxes at the dumpster. We're seeing brand new cars, that are being driven in. And so we're just going to get a little bit more aggressive. So what my point to that is, you have to be aware of these things. You're walking into a market where it's a little bit unstable. I think Houston is very stable overall. It has its ups and downs. It's the cost of living is very affordable still. It's why you're seeing massive migration from the Northeast and from the West Coast to warmer climates, the climates where $800,000 buys you quite a bit of house in Katy. $500,000 buys you quite a bit of house in Cyprus. And so you just got to know where your market is, understand it, and then guard it with your life. Like, this is my property. I'm going to guard it with my life.
Yep. Yeah. So going back to, I guess, I did ask you about 3 different questions in my question. So you hit one point. Talk to us about the buy and sale process. What are you seeing in the market? I mean, obviously you talk to a ton of brokers, you're taking a look at a lot of different deals. What are you seeing out there in terms of, I know you'd mentioned forbearance, right? And how that might affect, the quality of the deals that you're seeing. But just talk to us about what you're kind of seeing and hearing from the brokers too, as far as Houston goes.
Yeah, I think the supply is starting to pick up. I think there's a variety of reasons for that. Uncertainty is the biggest issue for sure. People don't know what's going to happen. It is tough to go hand to hand every day and knock on that door and, you're asking for the rent money and they don't want to pay. That gets difficult. The deal I told you that we just inherited, that's our biggest delinquency by a long shot in our portfolio, because the previous owner gave up. They didn't want to even try to play with it anymore. Their job was to keep the occupancy at 90%, so I get my financing, and that was it, right? And so now we're left holding the bag. So, to answer your question, I think there is supply there. I think people are getting wary. I'm COVID wary. I'm tired of dealing in this environment. I'm sure everybody else is. We're starting to get more aggressive with our collection procedures. I've authorized liens that we haven't done that before.
So talk to us about that. What is that exactly?
Okay, so check this out. Back in the recession, you did what you had to do to survive. And I was renting mostly Class C properties at the time. So there is a landlord lien that's on the back of your lease contract that allows you the permission, the right as the owner to go into any of your tenant's property unit and remove items of value to help cover your rent. So where I'm at today is that, yeah, you're making a face. That means you need to learn that, because that is a tool. I just introduced it today in our managers meeting, and you should have seen their faces light up with excitement, because they're tired of the CDC certificates saying that they've been trying to make rent payments and they haven't really. They've been committing perjury, because they're not even calling us to say if Joe
is that
Susie
legit,
Q,
right?
yeah, if Susie Q is making payments or not. So now I'm giving them tea, but that's been in there. We did that during the Great Recession, but we got soft. We forgot. We've been in a very nice, happy environment. But 3/4 of my managers in my 22 units, 3/4 of them raised their hand and said, I've done lockouts before. I've done liens, not lockouts, I'm sorry, liens. I've done liens. So my job today, I told them straight up today that number one, you need to prioritize your maintenance requests. You start with the ones that are paying rent first.
Yep. And
one day I'll get to the ones that aren't paying rent.
Unless it's a safety issue, right? I mean,
unless it's a safety issue, then I'm going to go to your unit. I'm going to make it uncomfortable for you. I'm going to take away your viewing entertainment. I'm going to take away that brand new TV. I'm going to find that iPad, because I know you got one. If I find a phone, I'm going to take it too. I'm going to take the coffee pot, because I know that's going to make you upset in the morning. And I'm going to remove your PlayStation, your video games. And I'm saying this because I did this during the recession. This is how we got through. And I'm going to get their attention. And one of two things is going to happen. They're going to come back and pay for their stuff. They're going to get off my delinquency, or they're going to leave.
Yeah.
Either way, I win. And so when you're buying things, you have to be aware of that. Like when a guy is trying to sell you a deal, how well has it been doing? You need to pay attention to the trends on the collections. What were they doing a year ago? What are they doing now? Are they really collecting the money? Are you going to get access to the bank statement so you can see that they're redepositing that? Because a piece of paper, it's not worth anything.
Yeah, I mean, accrual accounting versus what is actually banked in that month is two totally different things, right? As
Absolutely.
know. So
Absolutely.
I think, and people can get kind of creative in that respect as well.
Absolutely. So there is still a lot of great financing, which is another side point to what you're asking me. What financing is out there so you know what to offer. Mm-hmm. Right now is a great time to do a LIBOR-based loan. A loan where you have a adjustable rate. We started doing those we started doing those about 2 years ago.
You had mentioned at the beginning of it, right? Is you've done a lot of cash out refis.
Yes.
Right. And me and you have talked in the past, right? I mean, there's different schools of thought here, right? As to kind of do your rehab, get in a bridge, increase the value, do your rehab, and then pull money out, right? And I think you've done that on the majority of your properties.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you like that route versus putting permanent debt on it day one?
Well, because I'm in accumulation mode. So I got to get equity in, equity out to my investors so they can redeploy with me. Number two, when I do that like that, I get interest only. Versus when I do permanent debt, I have to pay principal many times. On a deal that I just got a contract on yesterday, we're going to sell one of my original deals, one of my legacy deals. In 10 years of ownership, I've paid principal on it for maybe 2 years. And that's it.
Oh.
And that's because I refinanced.
So you refinanced into another bridge.
Into another bridge, or to like a Freddie floater or something like that, where there was IO period, right? Yep. So of the 10 years, I've maybe paid IO 8 years. And that's what I want, because this isn't like a house. I'm not building equity that way. I'm creating equity, right? So as I create value, my deal's worth more. So that gives me that variance there between the DSCR that I need. So it's going to be worth more in the future if I keep doing my job right. So why do I want to pay principal? I don't. I want to max out the cash flow. And when it gets to a point to where I don't see the rent growth for that deal, or I'm tired of it, or I want to take the money out and I want to go put it into a bigger deal, we're going to do that, which is what we're doing in that deal. Those owners in that deal are going to walk away with the better part of 1,000% in 10 years of ownership. And I'm super, The IRR in that is like damn near 95%. It's pretty high, right? So, you need to understand the financing. We're big on Freddie floaters or, high interest only right now. It's a great opportunity. You want to keep that debt service down as much as you can, especially right now during COVID. You got to figure out, I don't want to have a lot of liability.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Now, just to be clear, right? Some of our listeners may feel, well, yes, you go with a floater, but then you have all that interest rate exposure that rates may move up. Obviously, you have protection through interest rate caps, so it's not that that you have the risk that you suddenly have to pay 10% in a worst case, right? Obviously, the rates can move up, but you still have protection built in with when you buy interest rate caps, and the lenders require it. But you as a borrower, you can also actually buy it down, so you have a tighter spread between the floating rate and where you potentially have the maximum rate. And I'm pretty sure you have thought about that too, Robert, right? Where you essentially it's a balancing act, right? Everything is a balancing act. But you go with a fixed rate loan or a floater, you look back in 5 years and then you can make a decision which one would have been the best, but you just do not know now, right? So it's always a balancing act, and ultimately, certainly with a floater, you have the most flexibility. There is no doubt about that. And you certainly also do not have that typical, particularly for larger conventional Fannie and Freddie loans, the massive prepayment penalties.
You hit it right there in the head, Anton. That's exactly it, right? Because that's what keeps you into a deal longer than what you want, right? Is that massive prepay or the defeasance or whatever they want, the yield maintenance, whatever they want to, whatever word they want to use. That's what it is. You, with these Freddie floaters, you have a very low payment to get out, a low penalty to get out, and you can either start the clock over again and get a new loan, or you can sell it to somebody else and let them get new loans. I've got a couple of deals, and I've learned this from trial and error. I've got deals right now that at the time had great Fannie products 3 years ago, 2 years ago, right? And now you're looking at like, dang it, I'm paying 4%, 5%. And guys are like, yeah, I don't want to buy your deal because I got to assume your loan. And I can't buy the loan out because the prepayment's too high, right? So I'm kind of like stuck in the deal, and I'm just going to have to keep operating for a while until I get to the point to where I can absorb the prepayment penalty, right? You can eliminate a lot of that when you go with these floating rate loans, and it's like maybe 1% of purchase or loan value. That's nothing. That's nothing. But you're talking like 10% or something like that. It's a whole nother animal. So make sure, I mean, what we're talking about is a little sophisticated. Make sure you have a good financial partner there. If you're not that financial guy, then somebody on your team has to be. Whether it's the partner sitting next to you or it's your mortgage lender, they need to explain to you exactly where these products fit for you, where rates might be going. I don't think rates are going anywhere. I think rates are going to continue to stay where they're at and if not go down. It's been like that for the last 2 years. We have a portfolio down in Alvin that we have 4 deals. They're all on floating rate floating rate loans. And we've always seen is just this little slow number. I mean, it's crazy how little the loans are. I hope they stay there forever.
Yeah. Good point. Obviously, we do not know where they're going. I share with you the view that short-term rates will stay low, right? The government has much more control over the short-term rates. Long-term, medium, including 10-year treasury, I'm not so sure. I feel that we will see an uptick there, potentially to 150, maybe 2%, which then plays in more towards your floating rate play, right? Because you do not, you are still flexible, yet you have that, you do not pay the higher rate.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I was going to ask, Robert, man, what are some of your goals, for 2021 and beyond? I mean, I know we talked about kind of where your box is, and I know you got 4,200 units, right? But where's Rockstar Capital in the next 12 months?
Rockstar Capital needs to continue to build its foundation. COVID was the best thing that ever happened to us because it took my eyes off of acquisition and put my operator eyes back into my operations and realized that we had some weaknesses that we needed to correct. So we made some staff changes internally. We made some corrections. We've done some software, but we've also seen a little bit of hiccups right now. So I don't like it. I don't like instability. I can't move forward if I have instability and I keep looking backward. And so it's very important to make sure that you have the right team. So we've been on a recruitment frenzy right now where we're bringing in the people that we need, people with a lot more years of experience than me who are in theory better at property management than me, right? And so you want to surround yourself with as much IQ in the room, and then you want to communicate with them as much as you can. Don't just hire somebody with 30 years of experience and give them the keys to the castle and think they're going to run it like you as the independent owner. They're not.
Yep.
They're very different, you know, because many of them come from third-party management companies, fee-based management companies versus independent ownership. They don't have the same wiring that you do, especially when you're the one that has to sign on the dotted line for millions and millions of dollars. So our plan right now is to continue growth, but we want to grow smart. We want to make sure that our operations are as stable as possible. We want to make sure that we have as much visibility and branding as possible. Our goal is to stand above the noise. So marketing is a big piece. We want to keep that pipeline filled. You know, I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone. We have his Cardone University, and he always talks about how companies fail, new businesses fail because they don't have enough in the pipeline. We want to build that pipeline. Pipeline gives you options. Just like when you have more rental income from a bigger deal, you get options for marketing and staff. More prospects, more leads gives you options on what you can do moving forward. That's more opportunities for conversion to stay full. So our goal right now is marketing. We want to make sure that our marketing is bringing in qualified leads and prospects so that our teams can convert, so that they have the right tools, that they can convert the right sales training, which is why we invested $75,000 in Cardone University last year to make sure our teams are watching that and they're learning to become better salesmen. Once they are where they need to be, then we'll push harder on our acquisitions. Deals aren't going anywhere, you know. We can talk about where deals might look like in Q3, Q4. I think there's going to be a lot of deals, right? But I also think that it's going to be tempered. It's not going to be what it was in the recession. So when those deals are ready, we want to have our occupancies as high as they can. As I start to shift my focus over here, I want to make sure I have the right team there, but I also want to make sure that I have the equity ready to go as well.
So are you going to be a net buyer or net seller this year, man? What does that equate to?
At the end of the year, we will have more units gained than where we're at right now. But I do have 2 deals under contract right now. I've got 118 units that 126 units that I'm selling, and I've got 125 units I'm going to sell, because these are legacy deals bought in 2011 and 2014, and they have a lot of juice in them, a lot of equity in them. And I need that equity to refill my treasure chest, so my war chest, so I can go buy some new deals.
So, I mean, what is the, you know, okay, hey, it's time to sell, right? You know, because I mean, you could have just as easily done that 2 years ago. I mean, obviously you had those deals for quite a while, right? Yeah. What metric are you guys looking at to determine, okay, hey, this is the good time to exit this deal?
Well, we're focusing on younger assets, and I've got quite a few that were built in the 1960s and 1970s, which is kind of where everybody starts. You know, a lot of guys start in the older assets because they're cheaper. The problem is I'm 46 years old. I was built in 1974, right? I don't run as well as I did 10 years ago. Well, my properties are no different. The piping is getting older, the wiring is getting older, and deals that I bought 10 years ago in the 1980, they were 1980 product, are actually like 1970s product today, right? So my 1970s products that I bought 10 years ago, like one of the deals I'm selling, was actually like a 1960s product. The 1960 product that I'm selling was actually feeling like a 1950s product, right? And so I'm getting rid of my smaller, older deals, which is where I got started. It's going to free up resources that we're committing to them because they got a lot of CapEx, you know, especially the older they are, right? You got piping issues, you got all kinds of things that are breaking. And I want to get out of that CapEx issue. I want to pull the equity out because it's not really going to grow at the number I needed to grow if I got to keep investing, you know, like into the property. And I want to free up capital so that when I'm ready to buy deals in Q3 and Q4, I've got sufficient cash.
So we're talking about
remember too this, Ben. You're only as good as what they remember.
That's true.
You know, I sold a deal in December of 19. We made 700% return after 7 years, but I haven't sold anything since. You've got to show completion, full circle, full cycle. And if I can sell a deal that I'm going to make 400% on that I bought in 2014, and I sell a deal that I make 1,000% on that I bought in 2011, I'm looking like the freaking king, right? I mean, I'm like the Midas touch over here. So people are going to want to continue to invest with you and redeploy that cash back. So there's a bit of a marketing arm as well. You don't fall in love with it. Don't fall in love with it. It's real estate. It makes you cash. And the more cash you have, great. But when you start to see a little interruption in the cash for whatever the reasons are, you know, and I can tell you, I'm focusing more on my 300 unit deals than I am on the 125.
It's just trying to roll out of the smaller stuff, roll out of the older stuff, get into the bigger, newer assets, right? So I know today's, you know, show is supposed to be about kind of Houston, but I know you have some stuff down, you know, South Texas as well. Yeah. So where are you focusing that acquisition energy, right? You know, I know you guys are being, you know, strategic on, you know, pulling the trigger on stuff, but are you spending more time looking at deals down in the South, or are you still looking more in Houston?
Yeah, what brought me out of Houston itself is the property taxes. I wanted to
Okay.
escape Harris County.
So let's
if
talk
you're
about
outside
that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
that, because that's a big, because people don't realize that. I mean, some people obviously are going to be listening around the country. Property taxes is a big problem here, right?
It's a big
So talk
issue.
about that.
Well, first of all, I want to escape property taxes. So I'm going to invest in areas where it's not so crazy in the property tax. So if it's outside Harris County, for me, it's free game. Corpus, South Texas, not Harris County, different market, different mindset down there, not as greedy and aggressive on the taxes there. So I can operate. Nearby, Fort Bend County is not as bad. You have Brazoria County, not as bad, but you're still in the Houston area. Our deals down in Alvin do very well. Just want to get out of the Harris County. What's gone on in Harris County the last few years is somebody decided that they wanted to get aggressive with property taxes. And so they started massively increasing your property tax value literally overnight. And what they're doing is they're now changing the cap rate to validate the numbers that they're trying to get. Like, they're showing cap rates for Class C properties at 5%. Like, really? Like 5% for a Class C property? But what they're doing, it's a game though. They want to see if you'll protest it so that you can negotiate a number later on. So they want you to hate this number. So they give you a crazy high number. You protest it. You're happy to take this amount of pain. But if they would offer this to you first, which is painful, but if they would offer that to you first, you wouldn't want that. You want even lower pain, right? So they're getting what they want. The city's got tax issues. They want to keep the revenue going. We've had COVID for the last year. They don't care. They're still going to keep pushing the needle, and it's your job to protest. It's a racket. These property tax companies are actually owned by previous tax commissioners. So if you go and you do that research, this is their retirement fund. They do their time as a tax commissioner, and then they come back and they open these companies up, and they know the game, and they create companies where they're going to help you protest the taxes because they know everybody. It's just a game internally, and you're wind up paying them anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 to $10,000 a fee per property because they're saving you hundreds of thousands of dollars on property taxes.
I heard that's a big negative for Houston, right? For our listeners. But obviously, me and you live here. We still love Houston. Tell me one of the reasons why people should invest in Houston.
Houston has the most entrepreneurial spirit of any other city I've ever heard of. You got low cost of living, especially in the suburbs. There's just a vibrant vibe here. Call it a red state vibe, call it a conservative vibe. There's just a nice vibe here in the city of Houston. We used to be all, oil and gas, and it's not like that anymore. We've got a lot more. There's a lot more legs on this stool in Houston, Texas. And so it's created a lot more opportunity for a lot of people, and people are still continuing to migrate here, especially in West Houston right now where the schools are. So it's been good. We're very fortunate that there was negative rent growth last year for COVID. Our company survived that. We were able to achieve rent growth. So we had anywhere from 7 to 10% swing from what the city average to what we got. Nice. But it's a good city. There's a lot of positivity in this town. There's still a lot of demand here. And if you know the market, you can do well. I know a lot of guys that want to invest in other towns, but it's so much easier to pull my 20 of my 22 managers here today so I can talk to them. And if there's an issue, I can drive to that property, right after this call. So it's good to still be familiar with your market and have roots in your market.
No, that's big. Boots on the ground is huge. I mean, I think people, they get caught up in just trying to find a deal, and they'll buy a deal wherever, right? But then they don't realize, hey, if something goes wrong, especially now with COVID, right? It's not as easy just hopping on a plane anymore. No. We have deals in Atlanta, and we could do a 1-day trip out there. Now you can't do it. It's 2 days. I got to stay overnight now. So you kind of think that. So that's also another reason to kind of think about the economies of scale and buying in bulk in one submarket like you did. So kudos to that. Well, yeah. All right, Mr. Anton, what else we got?
Yeah, so great information that you shared with us, Robert. Just one more point when it comes to these property taxes, right? That's it's not, to be fair, it's not just Harris County. We have it appears to me that all the tax assessors of the large major city counties have got together, whether it's Harris, whether it's in San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and decided let's crank up these assessments, right? So it only makes a big difference from county to county, and that's a very important message particularly for someone who is not familiar with Texas and certain submarkets in Texas, do not just make assumptions where the taxes are going to come in, right? You can have a very big wake-up call if you misjudge the taxes, right?
Absolutely. And so what that means for the new people listening in is that if a deal has a tax value of $3 million, but you're paying $9 million for that deal, they're going to assess it at $9 million. You need to do your underwriting at $9 million. You will likely fight it, and you might settle at $4.5–5 million, but that's still quite a bit. And that's year one. If you start to operate this deal and you start to get into it, you're making the value worth more, right?
Yep.
They're figuring that out too. So they're increasing your taxes every year by a significant number. And you have to ask yourself, is that, can I continue to increase my NOI through income generation, through expense management to cover the tax man? You know, like right now they're talking about doing, and I'm gonna give you a similar example. They're talking about doing unemployment. I'm sorry, the minimum wage, the $15, right? Well, that's going to jump up. People think that you can just pass that rent growth across. You're not going to be able to do that. It's going to be very, very difficult, you know, to do that, right? But, you know, what's going to happen is, you know, people that are at McDonald's or wherever, they are going to increase their cost of their goods. That's going to make it this way. It's going to be a very, very difficult situation. So I try to call it the four walls of my business. These are my controllable expenses, and I can control. Non-controllable expenses like property tax and insurance have been on the rise. I just have to try to mitigate them and manage them as best as I can, but I can't control this. So the best way to control your number here is by servicing your residents and making sure they don't leave, because you make no money when they move in. You got $3,000 of moving costs, of make-ready expenses.
Yep.
But you make money when they renew. Every renewal is worth around $50,000 to you. Every renewal of new valuation. So you make money when people renew, not when they move in. So it's very important. Become a great operator, learn what people need, take care of the basics for them, and generate the NOI as high as you can so that you can offset those taxes and insurance that are going to continue to rise.
That's a great point, man. Yeah, you gotta take care of the current tenants, right? Everybody gets caught up in leasing and new tenants and stuff like that, right? But if you could just get back to the basics and take care of the people that are already paying your rent, right? You know, you're gonna probably be off just as good because you don't have to turn the unit too. So I love that point. That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely. So thanks again, Robert, for having joined us today. You shared really some very great and also information that many people would not know about, right? So I really appreciate that. So how can people reach you?
Well, I appreciate it. Again, my name is Robert Martinez. I own Rockstar Capital. You can find me on Instagram at Apartment Rockstar. Please send me an email, send me a DM. If you're interested in investing, please let us know. You can find me on LinkedIn as well at Apartment Rockstar, or if you want to just be my friend on Facebook, it's at Robert Martinez.
Very good. Right. Appreciate it again. Robert, it was great to have you on.
Thanks, buddy. We appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much, guys.
All righty.